But talk to me about your philosophy about developing speed. Like I've never seen so many Illinois white athletic guys run 10.9, 10.8. I'm like, how is this possible? So talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, you say about, like the look. I mean, when I first met Corfus was around 2012, and he had like the fastest 4x1 team in the state. And they not only were all four of them white, but they looked like they belonged on the debate club, or in the choir.
Yeah.
They did not, there's a certain look.
Yeah.
I mean, at one time, I think the feeling at least in Illinois, was if you didn't have, four guys that look like future Olympians, you could not run well in the 4x1 or, in the sprint relays at all. So I think it's really important that myth was broken. So speed training to me is decomplexifying things.
Mm-hmm.
That you and I both know that we could probably together come up with 100 different things about max speed mechanics alone.
Right.
And there are people out there that do that for a living.
Right.
But that's not, I think those people have a hard time coaching 15-year-olds,
right,
or 16-year-olds.
For sure.
I would argue they might even have a hard time coaching elites.
Yeah.
Because I call them complexifiers. Whereas like I am the opposite. I'm a proud essentialist, a proud simplifier. So when I look at max speed mechanics, I mean, I just look at three things. Are they running tall? Now, Corfus says they need to run with the heart, like that. You don't want to be too tall, but that's kind of complex, and I can see that if you're too tall, you're kind of back on your haunches a little bit, but we want to run with good posture. We don't want to run bent over. We don't want to run leaning back. So generally speaking, run tall. And then secondly, we want to be loose enough in our shoulders to have our hand on the backstroke past the hips by about a foot. People who run too much, and I say there's a difference between running and sprinting, and the distance coaches damn near kill our sport because they think that running is running. And I say, no, running and sprinting are two different things. Distance guys will run what I call like T-Rex. They run with little arms in front of their body. Sprinters run with big arms that lengthen on the downstroke and cross their hips. I was actually driving Carl Lewis to a TFC presentation several years ago. I took 5 wrong turns because I was very, very nervous. But we were talking about the backstroke, and he says, elbow to the sky, elbow to the sky. So I'll never forget that because Carl Lewis said it. But if your hand goes past your hips by 12 inches, your elbow will go towards the sky. And the important thing there is that if that happens, your shoulder stretches and there is a reflex action springing your shoulder forward, your arm forward, which does not take any energy. That stretch reflex is an elastic, energy-free movement. So that's the second thing. Posture, second thing, arms. Third thing is we want to be big in front, just big in front. Now, some guys are big in front and they think I mean high knees. Actually, it's more than that. It's the knee in front with the foot somewhere underneath it.
Yeah.
That if really young athletes, when they skip, when they do high knees, when they sprint, somehow the foot lags behind the knee. It stays behind. And if you're really going to hit the foot with a downward, I think Ken Clark is complex because tangential force.
Yeah, tangential force. Yeah.
Or Jonas talks about whipping from the hip. That if you're going to hit at the right angle, the foot must go past the hips.
Yeah.
You have to have the foot and knee out in front of the body.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to do just 3 things, I say run tall, hands past the hips, big in front. And if I want to say just one thing, run like Carl. And then, but as you know, there are complexifiers out there who argue with me and say, that's way too simple. We should not be teaching towards a norm. We should take every guy and accentuate what he does well and accept what he does kind of quirky and blah, 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 blah. And, like, look at Andre DeGrasse. He had one straight arm, but he did that because of anti-rotational blah, 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 stuff I don't even understand. But they're not teaching the general population how to sprint.
Right.
You can't teach.
You have outliers at the top. You definitely have outliers at the top. And people would say, well, Bolt did this, so you should do this. Well, Bolt's 6'5" and had extremely long femurs. Like definitely I hear you on that.
If I coached DeGrasse and he ran 9.75 at USC and then he signed with me, I don't think I would have changed him either.
No. And it might be too late to make those changes.
Absolutely. And some of those changes or some of those quirky things are so built into his success that it is smart to accept those things. But don't tell me that a kid that runs horribly or terrible or quirky, whatever he does, runs like T-Rex arms, that I should be like trying to accept those things with a 14 or 15 or 16, 17-year-old.
That runs 12 flat. It's like, come on.
We're going to teach towards the norm. And then, So we do those things. So overall, I'm a simplifier. I teach towards the norm, and we sprint a lot.
How often do you sprint?
We sprint 2 times minimum a week, maximum 3. Now, I think we need to define sprinting. Sprinting is one of my sayings. How do you train a cat? You sprint as fast as possible, which means you're wearing spikes, you're on a hard surface, and you're timing. So that's number 1. You sprint as fast as possible, as often as possible. That means 3 or 4 times in a session and 2 or 3 sessions a week. That's as often as possible. And the third thing is staying as fresh as possible, meaning that we never sprint tired, depressed, or sore. So all those things have to work. And it's interesting where I pirated that statement. I read a book. I'm proud that I read it, called Squat Every Day. And you're a reader like I am. You'd be the type of guy that would read that book.
Definitely.
And in that book, it said, squat as heavy as possible, as often as possible, staying as fresh as possible. And even though I didn't really agree with that about squatting, I was able to translate that into a great slide in my presentations. Yeah,
it's completely different than what we've been taught, is that a nervous system can't handle more than 2 squat sessions a week and all this. But if you can microdose it, then you can achieve that.
Microdosing is huge. And see, this is what people really don't understand about Feed the Cats. Charlie Francis believed, same as me, came to his own conclusions, that you can only sprint 2 or 3 times a week. He totally understood that. But then the question comes, what do you do in your other days?
Right.
And what he would do is tempo. And basically, for those people who don't know what tempo is, it's like third gear sprinting. It's like, I tell my guys, if we were going to do tempo, that to look like a sprinter, but don't sprint fast. And we're going to go a little bit longer and more often. So we don't do tempo. True confession, we might actually do 800s once, where we are actually doing tempo. But basically, we don't.
I knew it.
I know. I'm sorry.
I do it.
You made me so relaxed that I
awesome.
confessed. That's okay. Yep. That's okay. I confessed. So what I do instead is exercises that I call X Factor, that are random. We want a stimulus. I tell people, if you came into an X Factor workout, you'd be disappointed. It's mostly standing around, which means that we might do in an hour, a kid might do 20 to 25 5-second things. And people say, no, wait, in the textbook, it says those things are high CNS activities as well. And I don't dispute that. But we are so microdosed in that stuff that I don't think we burn the steak. I don't think we burn a fuse. And if you look at the previous day when we sprinted, I think we're very microdosed there. Our entire speed workout yesterday, first day of track practice, we worked for an hour. We had 35 kids in my sprint group. And even though we worked for an hour, they truly only worked for 60 seconds.
Okay.
So that's like 59 minutes of standing, 60 seconds of intensity.
Yep.
So when people say you're going to burn them up, that's way too much CNS activity. It's like, I don't think you understand how microdosed we are. So we are microdosed throughout all the off season, all of it. And it's only about 4 weeks before our first track meet that we say we need to learn how to sprint further and more often, which is speed. I hate to say the E word, endurance, or capacity. Capacity is the number of races we could run. Speed endurance, I don't like that word. I like to call it sprint farther.
Yeah.
So we learn how to do that by doing capacity workouts and lactate workouts.
Yeah.